we're at in the world. So the 2019 infrastructure offerings mainly focused on three key areas. So the first of these areas is basically the cloud on-premise discussion. So, part of the initiative here is that, and this is a carryover from 2018 that's going to be driven deeper, is how do we become more portable, more agnostic when it comes to multi-cloud, cloud usage. Right now, obviously, we're strong in Azure. There's now a mandate, obviously, to look at AWS. We're also looking at GKE, but basically what's going to happen is that cloud's going to become commodity, and how do we accommodate that within the next 1 to 3 years, right, in the near term. In addition, we're looking at how do we abstract that away. So that's the kind of the portability aspect of it, is that, are we really going to get specific in how we niche in each cloud, or are we going to come up with a way to interface with them in a common way? And so that's the agnostic piece of that offering. And the on-premise portion that's something that we're just getting asked for a lot, right? It's good that we're in cloud and we've got a CI/CD experience that gets us into cloud. We know how to operate cloud, and we've got great metrics on how to operate cloud once we get there. But then how do we replicate that similar experience into on-premise? When customers have strong requirements for being, on their data center, right, or even in their actual cloud systems themselves. So that's going to be a core focus is how do we deliver value in those three particular areas. For the next section, next slide, please. How do we, looking at the offerings themselves, which will basically revolve around application hosting and all the additional services, how do we get better at all the components that comprise that delivery and that, operation? So, focusing on automation and orchestration on a deeper level. We made great strides in 2018. How do we continue that success? How do we convert, our infrastructure engineers, our DevOps engineers, our operations engineers into stronger coders, more agile with software? How do we continue to drive security as a cross-cutting layer in all, aspects? And then how do we create alignment so that we make sure that there's no silos? Like the very heart of what DevOps was focused on was how do you break down all the barriers that prevent the fast quality delivery of great software? And that's going to be another core focus, is not just on the technology itself, but on the processes, the procedures, the thought, the mindset, the culture that creates speedy delivery within an organization. So that's, for us, really the heart of DevSecOps. And then the next slide. The last component is that right now, infrastructure, well, not right now, but for a good portion of 2018, infrastructure was cumbersome, right? Getting to that last mile of delivery, just wasn't where we wanted it to be. And what we're going to focus on in 2019 is that how do we make it invisible? How does it just kind of go away? How is it that developers can be less concerned and SVGs be less concerned about what the underlying technologies and infrastructures and processes are? How can they go to one portal, kick in some information that gives them their requirements, and then hit a button and just go? And this speaks to the push-button delivery that Vaughn was referring to earlier. How can we make it so that self-provisioning is real-time? How can we focus on, services that matter, like not the fringe services like the latest, whatever graph database, but how do we focus on things that are core to our business? And then how do we create reliability and uptime that breed trust? One of the things, and I'll say this because I'm in with the operations and the DevOps teams, is that we want to make sure that there's no questioning about the quality of our services. I think in 2018, there were probably some areas where we kind of lost trust a little bit. We want to make sure that's a seamless experience inside 2019, and we've already made great forays in 2018 for that. In addition, one of the things we get asked, and this is more of an on-premise focus, how do we get a single Sentience install? If you use any of the tools or go to any open source website, you go there, you tell your operating system or whatever other environmental variables you got, you hit go, and it gives you the experience that you want. How do we do that with Sentience both in cloud and in on-premise? And so that's going to be a core focus for our infrastructure offerings in 2019. So I'm going to move into some specific sets here, just kind of talk briefly about some components. And so if you don't mind going to the next slide. I'm going to talk about kind of the current state of things, some principles to consider, the kind of the SDLC, if you will, focus on evolutionary service offerings, and then kind of some other aspects that are outside of the technology that we're going to focus on from an infrastructure perspective. And I will wrap this up with just a quick summary of the two primary offerings that infrastructure is really going to go after from a pre-experience, an operating experience, and a post-deployment experience standpoint. So next slide, please. And actually, let's go to the next one. So just to mention this is that, some of the things I kind of referred to earlier is that in 2018, siloization and handoffs kind of killed us, right? That was something that, and this is true in any organization. This is not specific to Honeywell. Handoffs is where the disaster is going to occur, right? When you have to do translation between one team and another, when you don't have alignment, when you don't have common mission, when there's different priorities, different contexts, those are the kind of things that really kind of challenge us within Sentience, and we want to make sure that we resolve that. In addition, our technology adoption process was not super solidified. That's basically a bygone thing at this point in time. We have a very, at least, clear process about who you have to talk to if you want to onboard new technology. There was also some challenges with context switching, and of course, priorities of the day is that we had not really worked out a lot of our internal processes about how we took on new requests, and a lot of that has been abated already as we roll into the new year. Next slide, please. So what kind of principles are we looking at? Next slide, please. For the 2019 year. So obviously automation is key, and not just automating everything, but automating the things that matter, right, in order to drive a deeper experience. Obviously repeatability is key. We don't want to keep, everything's not a unicorn, a snowflake unicorn, which oddly enough was kind of a common theme. We seem to have snowflake unicorns all over the place, and so we're trying to get to repeatable code. Visibility is also another challenge, right? I mean, when you put something in with us, how do you know it's there? How do you know it's running? How do you know how our service is doing? Where are the status pages? Where are the metrics that you want to see to know how your application is functioning, so that you can get, have some assurance that things are functioning the way you want them to? Next slide, please. Efficiency. This is something that is a mandate that comes not only from our customers, but also comes from the top down quite a bit. Because in particular, operations gets this question a lot. How do we, make our use of cloud? How do we make our use of internal resources? How do we make our use of tools more efficient, right? It's not just the technology decisions themselves, but the actual operation of the technology. It's all about how do we get lean, how do we stay nimble, and how do we stay cost effective, because we don't want to compromise our balance sheet, because at the end of the day, we are here to make money, right? So, and the second piece is skillfulness, right? As part of the technology adoption process, there was a lot of sprawl, and as a result, it was hard for us to build expertise. And that crushed us at all levels. This was not just a security and architecture and operations, it was, everybody was running into this because there was just way too much sprawl. And so part of that is that we want to start building deep skill sets following the rule of three, having 3 people who can be SMEs on that topic in the organization, so that we can continue to drive our efficiency and continue to drive automation and drive repeatability. And then last is how do we do something that is evolutionary? If we continue to kind of chase the ball in the industry, we're going to always end up being behind. But at the same time, I don't want to try and guess where the ball is going to go and make wrong guesses. I don't want to be bleeding edge. I want to stay cutting edge. So, we're going to take some of the investments that we've made, for example, in containerization technology, and we're going to continue to drive those forward. So we're going to be looking at service meshes. We're going to be looking at predictive AI for, troubleshooting. But we've always got to balance that with what's the value, and do we have the capacity to implement it in a skillful manner? And so we'll be balancing all that together as we look at evolutionary architectures. And then last, and arguably the most important, because I think this is oddly enough capitalism and Darwinism at its finest, next slide please, is adaptability. We have to be making choices that are going to account for the fact that we cannot predict the next 3 to 5 years. We can make general statements about trends that cloud's going to become commodity and that containerization is going to take over, and that hopefully, everything from Bitcoin and blockchain and AI are going to just become democratized, and they're going to be standard parts of our lives, and that smart is going to drive in every aspect of our home lives. But we still have to make choices that we know are not going to lock us in to where we can adapt to the changing market. And so, as part of that agnosticism and portability components that I was talking about early on, we are making choices to make sure that we can stay portable as the future changes, right? So we're going to talk a little bit of the development lifecycle. So slide 23, please. Thanks. And so right now we have a working software build and delivery process. The DevOps team has been operating on this for at least 6, maybe 9 months. And it does exist and it runs, and actually the existing Sentience 1.0 platform is programmatically rebuilt every day, right? So it's already in containers. It's been that way for at least 6 to 7 months. I think actually it's been a year. I don't have exact numbers on that. But we follow this now. And as you see, you're going to see technology selections that are already existent here, such as Terraform, Ansible, Kubernetes, Docker. And what we're really focused on is the process that enables those technologies to live, because we're going to change those technologies. We want to make sure that we have a clear process that everybody can be comfortable with, even if you're not directly involved in it, right? So that you can know that we're following best practices and that we're using best-of-breed tools to make these things happen. Next slide, please. In addition, we want to make sure that we extend our amazing software engineering practices into operationalization and infrastructure. Obviously the lines are blurring with DevOps between, what is programmatic creation of software and what is programmatic creation of infrastructure software. Those lines are just coming together, right? Because with software-defined networking, software-defined services, with containerization, everything's just now software. We're no longer monkeying around with hardware, so we want to take the same practices that we use in software engineering, and we want to make sure that they run end-to-end as we define software for the product environment, not just the product software. And then we're looking more and more about, how do we socialize and define definitions of done that push quality higher into the environment. So as you see on our list here, how do we answer questions about how to maintain and support software? How does it perform? How do we recover it? Monitoring, logging. I mean, how many times have you come to deploy an application and you realize that you yourself are not sure how it's going to scale, or how you're going to get information out of the application, or how is it going to be distributed, how is it going to be networked? And so what we're doing is we're trying to add a little bit more process to that, not enough to smother it, but enough to support a higher level of quality in our deployment and delivery processes. Let me stop there because I've been talking for quite a bit. Does anyone have any questions about anything I talked about? I feel like I was kind of speeding through it there.
Makes sense.
Take a breath.
I mean, obviously, you're covering tons of ground here, but are there sort of trainings, tutorials? Are there things for actual people to then get started with these? How do we access those? Documentation?
Yeah. So one thing that we're going to be doing this year is you'll see a series of blogs coming from the architect group. It's not going to be the philosophical blogs that you see, why Kubernetes, or there's tons of topics out there, but more just how to, rubber meets the road, how to install, or how to deploy, how to use data. I mean, literally a series of how to, and it's going to be quite a few. So we're actually putting together our list now. What you should see is roughly 3 a month of blogs just on how-tos, or maybe more. Depends on how ambitious the individuals are. But that's something that we're going to do to help the teams to, hey, this is actually how we're actually
kind of taking that one step farther. Well, I think something that would be really helpful. You mentioned try to have 3 SMEs for whatever big topics, but understanding who those people are. So I can go and ask a question, or I can go sit next to Michael until he answers my question. Just having some resource, a blog post. I mean, that's self-service. That's phenomenal. Totally needed. Knowing who to talk to if something isn't covered by that would be also really helpful.
That's the same exact thing for operations. We are publishing weekly stuff. It's not like a blog. It's not like kind of fashionable labels, but that's the information that goes weekly published.
And actually, I'll talk more about that towards the end.
Okay.
I got some more
Q&A
pieces
at the end too. So
Yeah.
We'll ask too many questions.
No, it's good. So, a couple of kind of highlights, and this is mainly around technology-specific choices, but also services, is that, the app hosting environment, is currently out and running right now. But think of like EC2, like in 2010, right? We've got a great offering. It's solid. It's stable. But it doesn't have all the bells and whistles that people are looking for a 2018 experience. But guess what? It'll get there really fast, and it definitely will happen soon. And so we're looking right now kind of for the app hosting environment that we're using OpenShift as our underlying technology. Honestly, you probably won't even see that because we have a great automated portal that Maria's team set up for interfacing into that environment. But also just know, a lot of the asks I get is when can we get to actually the full capabilities of Kubernetes? And I got to tell you, again, you saw my whole thing about technology adoption, other components. We'll get there, but we actually have to invest in the technology that we have currently before we make those leaps in evolution, right? Logging and monitoring, by the way, is currently in its evolution towards production. That's also going to be made into a standard feature set. Again, a technology that will probably be abstracted away from you, and we will include it in your experience. But just know that we have a version of that now, and we'll be evolving more versions of that as we go forward. Not just APM itself, but also just systems level monitoring, so you can see what's going on with the infrastructure. APM, by the way, I mentioned is already active and working. There's obviously some cost implications for that, but that's something else that we're going to evolve as a service. And then, and this is probably the overarching message, is that we're focusing on a single smooth interface for installing applications. Because at the end of the day, that's what we all really want. We just want to get software out there faster, quicker, of higher quality. We don't have to worry about scalability, worry about security. That should be ideally our concerns, all of Sentience. And so that's really the thing. We want to get to a single unified portal that all the offerings exist at, so that you can go to one place, get the information you need, and even find the documentation, or even who to talk to, right, if you need support, right? And then just to mention this is that currently we have 4 deployment models that have been socialized with us: Honeywell Cloud, customer cloud, customer premise connected, and customer premise disconnected. It is worth mentioning that we are going after those in that order. There's no commitment for particularly the fourth one. We're probably not going to chase the customer premise disconnected right off the bat because that is the most complex of the supported use cases. It's hard to support software that never actually talks out to the internet, especially to us, right? But know that we are chasing the Honeywell Cloud Experience, which is what you have now with Sentience. We are looking at how to expand that deployment model into, like, to say, a customer subscription, how that gets supported. And we are looking at how do we get to customer premise when they have accessibility to our, components on the internet. Next slide. Let's go into Unity and culture and delivery. So we're continuing to focus not just on the technology itself, but all the processes and people that surround it. So we're continuing to unify the engineering teams, the security teams, the architecture teams, the operations teams. I chose DevSecOps because that's kind of how we talk about it, and that's what the teams are labeled under Maria's leadership. And again, kind of re-emphasizing that we've got to build expertise, manage context switching, increase visibility, increase definition of done. And then, really, one of the things you're going to see big change is maybe not so much in terms of how you interface with us technologically, but how you hear us talk about ourselves from Sentience. It's going to be, one team with one goal. So you're going to see a kind of cross-cutting teams focused on how do I deliver, for example, app hosting, or how do I deliver IoT, or how do I deliver data services. So you're going to see a really kind of clean alignment among the Sentience itself, where you're going to be interfacing with a team that cuts across all functional areas. So it's going to be really nice. We're kind of excited about that, actually. And then just one last point on that last slide was that, focusing on the innovation aspect, and that, how do we, again, stay in the cutting edge, focus on things, and not even think like that the outside of the box. There is no box. Anything is possible technologically, but what is it that will provide the most business value, and what is it that will provide the most business value now, but will keep us set up for the next 1 to 5 years, if not the next 100 years, although that would be optimistic, right? Next slide, please. Some of the specific goals is that unification of teams that we talked about, operationalizing OpenShift for the app hosting environment, making sure that it's fully up to our quality standards and that we provide a 2018 experience. Defining and socializing the SDLC at a much higher level of clarity than I think we've done in the past. Like, for example, if you want to do new product features, how do you get those product features into us? Those are the kind of socializations that we want to make sure happen. And then creating that seamless, installation experience that I referred to earlier. That's going to be a very key goal for 2019. And then, basically making sure that we centralize where do you go? Where do you go if you want to deploy an application? Where do you go if you request a virtual machine? How do you get support from Maria's team? How do you get security to get involved? Centralizing that portal. And I will say that if you were to distill this down into just 2 major things to think about as you walk away today from an infrastructure perspective, for us it's really about how do we create a seamless experience for delivery into application hosting, and then how do we get you the services that you want on that application hosting? How do we get you the NoSQL databases, the RDBMS? How do we get you search? How do we get you RabbitMQ, Kafka, whatever it is that you're using? So it's really going to be a core focus on that beautiful application deployment experience into that application hosting and all the adjunctive services that you need to run those applications. That's what we're really going to kick the tires on from an infrastructure perspective. Any questions?
Okay.
Good stuff.
Thank you, Michael.
All right.
All right, next up, we have Alpesh is going to talk to us about data.